music sounded so good like this. Fabulous. Time to show, it's your time. You're nominated as the greatest, and your flow and blow minds. Radio done rated, some outdated. The friends you know, you won't find. True life stages, gotta count the pages.
Good day and welcome to the Washington Report. I'm Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, and I'm blessed to serve as the Virgin Islands delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives. The Washington Report was created to inform Virgin Islanders on current federal issues that directly affect our community. The show's guests range from political leaders to community activists. This show is all about getting information for you. Therefore, I encourage you to email your questions, ideas, thoughts to askstacey@mail.house.gov to have them addressed on future shows. Now, this guest is a pleasure, and I want all Virgin Islanders to share the show so that you can learn about my guest today. Lieutenant General Samuel Eberson, retired 3-star United States General. General Eberson was born on St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, but moved to the mainland United States, settling in New York City, and attended City College of New York, CCNY, and obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science in 1961. While at the university, he enrolled in the ROTC program, and after graduation, received his military commission as a second lieutenant. During his military career, General Eberson served in South Vietnam during the buildup of the Vietnam War as a military advisor. He was promoted to colonel, and from 1983 to 1985 was the commander of the 1st Brigade, 101st Airborne Division Air Assault at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and then from 1986 to 1988, he was Chief of Staff at Fort Lewis in Washington State. General Eberson served as the Commanding General of the 2nd U.S. Army at Fort Gillem in Georgia from April 1990 to 1992. General Eberson was promoted to Brigadier General on January 1st and then the rank of Lieutenant General in March of 1993. 1 year later, in 1994, he received his last military assignment and became the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Military Personnel Policy and was stationed at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. General Eberson retired from military service in January of 1997 at the rank of Lieutenant General. General Eberson was, of course, highly decorated for his service, receiving over his career the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, and other commendations. He's also served 4 presidents on the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. So, General Eberson, thank you so much for making some time to be with us on the show and to share your life story, your ideas and thoughts with the people of the Virgin Islands.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Stacey.
Thank you, sir.
Almost like being home.
Oh, I know it's not a picture of St. Croix, but it's still the Virgin Islands, right?
I can tell from the blue waters.
So, speaking of home and the U.S. Virgin Islands, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood on St. Croix?
Well, I sort of grew up in an environment that was very nurturing, as all of my friends in those days. And it's an environment in which respect was important, not only for others, but for your family, for all grown-ups. Yes, sir, no, ma'am, was the local dialogue of the day.
Yes.
Not yes, no. And,
yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine.
But it was the culture that, and it was a very nurturing environment. We had an opportunity to go out and experiment, to reach out, to ride our bicycles all over the islands, and yet had that responsibility to be home at a certain time when we were told to be home, and where education was important.
Yes.
I always knew that I was going to go to college because they expected me to do that.
Yes.
And they said that to me time and time and time again. So it was ingrained in the education part of my upbringing, just like the rest of my friends in
Yes.
those days.
Now, did you grow up in Christiansted, Fredericksted, Mid-Island, country? What
I
part?
was a Hill Street boy
Ah.
out of good old Christiansted, St. Croix.
On Hill Street,
Up on the hill.
part of the Hillsiders.
You got it.
Got you. So when you come to New York, you finish high school in New York City, and then you enroll in college. As you said, that was the expectation. Why did you enroll in ROTC during your college days?
Well, a lot of my friends, some Estonians and Latvians, who I played on the high school soccer team with, they were enrolled at City College and enrolled at ROTC as well as members of the Pershing Rifles, which is a military fraternity. And I started hanging out with those guys. But the institutions to which they belong were pretty well respected and were very well run in those days on the campus. And so I kind of meandered to it. And then I ran into a guy who was a leader in both of those organizations that talked me into joining ROTC for $27 a month, which was a lot of money in those days. But more importantly, it was the coat that the ROTC provided all its students, which was a camel hair 3/4 style coat. That was the hit in the village in those days.
You look
and that's
good.
what I wanted.
You look good.
And it looked good.
I mean, New York during that time period must have really been something else.
Well, the West Village was in vogue in those days, and that's where I used to kind of hang out.
And did you run into a lot of Caribbean people during that time?
Well, my family, we just like we did in the islands, we all clustered together. When we had parties or functions, it was all family members. You know, so he kind of grew up in a West Indian culture in New York City as well.
And now, where did the people from the Virgin Islands meet? Where would you go to meet each other?
They were all, every dance they had, the West Indian dance in some ballroom, they were there. The Renaissance, the Palladium, those are the places that they kind of went to party.
Nice.
But mostly the partying was done in somebody's house.
It's hard
My
to see
aunt,
you,
my
General,
uncle.
as a partying kind of person.
I used to be. Then I finally got wised up that it was important to study. And so I was majoring in lounge at one point in time. And a good friend of mine, because of our West Indian culture, I think got us together, Colin Powell, kind of pointed me in straight and narrow. Like, he would come by when I was in the lounge and say, "Hey, don't you have an exam coming up tomorrow? Go study in the library."
Now, he was a bit older than you.
He was 2 years ahead of me, both in terms of the college status and age.
And tell me about your friendship with him.
Well, we sort of, our West Indian culture kind of grew us together. You know, coming from the same backgrounds.
Right.
He from Jamaican background, I from the
Virgin Islands.
And they're all similar cultures.
Yeah.
He kind of talked me into joining ROTC. Of course, I had a little bit of push too along the way from my buddies who were in the program as well, and so I had a relationship that kind of grew, and we bonded over the years.
Now, you know, many Virgin Islanders may not be aware that when General Powell, Secretary Powell, recently passed, he had a very private, not the kind of pomp and circumstance funeral that most people would think someone of his stature would have. And you were asked to speak at his funeral, which says that you guys were pretty close to one another. What was that relationship like?
Well, I got to tell you, if it wasn't for Colin, I wouldn't have graduated from school because he kept me on the straight and narrow. I wouldn't have had an Army career because he talked me into joining ROTC. And my son, Christopher, would not have been baptized because I asked him as a payback to be the godfather of my son. And I kept putting it off, and finally one Sunday morning I got a call about 9 o'clock that said, Sam, get Lillian and Christopher ready. I've made arrangements to baptize Christopher this morning in the Woodbridge Lutheran Church. I'm coming to pick you up in an hour.
And that was it.
That's how my son got baptized. That's how close we became. And the island culture is, I was uncle, and Lillian, my wife, was auntie as
To his
Powell
children.
kids, his kids, and the same relationship developed with our
With Aunt Alma,
and
Uncle Colin.
you know, and Uncle Colin. And but the uniqueness about Colin, the thing that I admired over the years, was his consistency of the fundamental underpinnings of his values, principles. He was a guy of strong character, great ethics. He was loyal to the nth degree. He believed in hard work, and he had a sense of presence about him, like people I never could match that same. He walked into a room, and all of a sudden, the focus of that whole area turned to him. That's the kind of stature that he had, and he believed in this promise of America, the promise that said there's opportunities here, but you got to put yourself to the grindstone to get yourself prepared to take those opportunities. And education, preparation, presence, persistence, all the kinds of things that drive you to be successful. And he was the same the day I met him till the day he passed away. Never changed.
Well, General, you know, Colin Powell was one of my heroes. And I can recall the first time I ran into him. I was worked at the Justice Department with Larry Thompson, and we were going to a State Department meeting while he was Secretary of State. We went up to the executive floor, and General Powell, Secretary Powell, was bent over a Xerox machine, trying to unjam paper and working on the Xerox machine. You know, did whatever was necessary. But we're here to talk about you, because you are a giant in your own rights as well. And I know that Secretary Powell must have seen that in you, why he was so persistent about you finishing school and having a military career and being his friend and allowing his family that he cared for so much for you to be so close to them. And you have had an illustrious military career. And can you tell us what some of the highlights of that career were to you?
Well, the biggest thing that I always take away from when I reflect back on the things that I enjoyed being in the military was working with the youngsters and watching them grow. And then down the way, as I went along my career, watch them become successful and become leaders in their own right. That to me was the highlight of my military career. I commanded most units, from small units to large units, Army size, and that was great too. Another piece that I think was helping people. What I didn't like about the military was having to write letters or make the calls that said your son or your daughter or your father or brother or spouse got injured today or died today.
Yeah.
That broke my heart every single time. And when I think about those times, it really makes me sad, still today. But other than that, the military was a great institution. It remains a great institution today. And one of the other things that I feel pretty good about was the years I spent working with the Congress on behalf of the U.S. Army.
You've dealt with some really interesting congressional characters as well.
I worked with all the old, what they call the old hands. When the handshake was as good as the
Yeah.
word that you put in writing.
I mean, you told me a little bit about being in Alaska with for Senator Ted Stevens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I had 4 years in Alaska, and it's mainly due to Ted Stevens wanted me to go to command in Alaska when I was chosen for command.
Wow.
And I spent 4 years in experiencing that cold weather up there, but that's the greatest training area in the world.
Well, I mean, coming from the Virgin Islands to a place with what's some of the coldest weather you've experienced there?
Well, my first winter up there, the ambient temperature went down to 95 below. We were out in the field. I had the division out in the field.
You had them outside.
We were in the field.
In negative 95.
Negative 95. And I remember great days when my wife it'd be so cold, my wife would go out and run with the troops. As they passed by our house, she would go and join. And watching her with icicles coming out of her nose when she came back from running with them. But
Wow.
it was a great environment to be in. And I enjoyed it every minute of the time up there. Now, I don't want to have experience any snowstorms ever again, but that's
Fair enough.
another story.
Fair enough, fair enough. Now, you've been stationed so many places. What are some of the places that really stand out to you, and why are they some of your favorite?
Well, I guess my favorite place of all, I think, was being here in Washington, D.C. Most people tell you that's a terrible tour, but it's a place that we were able to do things to make the Army better every day that you came to work.
Right.
And working with the Congress, explaining the Army's needs, and getting some of those needs met, building a relationship of confidence between the Army and between the Army and the Congress was critically important. Heading up the rescue operation after Hurricane Andrew,
Right.
where out of that came the restructuring of FEMA, where the Senate took it on themselves to dig into FEMA's background and change it to what it is, effective organization today. That came from the experience and the processes we developed in Hurricane Andrew.
How did you get assigned to head up the relief effort for
I was on the
Hurricane
golf
Andrew?
course, getting ready to celebrate my wife's birthday. I got a call, and my aide said, "You are going to Florida, and we have to leave in 2 hours." It was my aide and I down on the ground landing in Florida, and that was my staff.
You and your aide.
My aide and I. And from that, in 5 days, we built up to over 550 people
Wow.
to run the operation.
Wow. And how long did you guys stay there? Do you
We
remember?
stayed there until beginning of December.
From the September,
from
the August,
August.
before.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And that did lead, Andrew was really important for recognizing the needs
one
and
of
the
the
changes.
It was one of the few Category 5 hurricanes ever hit the nation. It was devastating.
You know, you talk about being in Washington as a military advisor to the federal government, to Congress, and letting them know what the military needs are. You talked about doing troop readiness in Alaska. You served in Vietnam, Hurricane Andrew. That's such a tremendous range of experiences and opportunities. What advice do you give a young person who is thinking about a military career, how to navigate that, to have the kind of career that you had?
Well, I think the first thing I would say to them is, whatever you do, give it your best. Secondly, remember that education is important. You never stop learning, so keep on learning. The third piece would be know yourself. Know your strengths and your weaknesses, and don't be afraid to fail. You learn by failure. Don't let emotion dictate how you make decisions. Look at all the alternatives.
Not even a little emotion?
What I like to say, as Colin used to say, get mad, but move on. You know, you need to get mad once in a while.
Right.
It levels the playing field.
Uh-huh.
But then don't let the emotion dictate how you're going to respond.
Got you. Got you.
And more importantly, take care of your people. And remember to say thanks. Give credit where credit is due. And be optimistic. Optimism builds confidence, not only your own, but it builds confidence in the people that work with you and for you.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. You talked a little bit about your relationship with Colin Powell. Would you say that he was the most influential person in your life? Or is there someone else?
Besides my wife, Lillian,
Now, how did you meet your wife, Lillian?
we met in college, at City College, in the lounge, by the way.
So there was some benefit to being in the lounge.
And Colin knew her before I did.
Oh. Now, and your wife is from the neighboring island?
No,
Family's
she's
from Puerto Rico.
Family from
right?
Ponce, Puerto Rico. And they became Bronxites. She was born in New York, though. Then they moved New York City. Then they moved to the Bronx.
Right. So, besides your wife, you said Colin Powell?
Colin, because of all, I admired him for his what he was, his sense of understanding of values and characters, his loyalty, and the way he went about developing the way he lived. And anybody wants to understand Colin Powell or how to be a good leader and manager, read his 13 rules and study him and develop your own to lead you down life's path.
Right.
And I wouldn't have had the career that I had in the military had he not introduced me into ROTC, and then was sort of my comrade in arms throughout my military career. We never worked together directly in units, but we were together in spirit all the time. And he was my mentor.
You know, you've been a mentor to a lot of people very quietly. Supported a lot of Virgin Islanders, a lot of young people. You're someone that we can call on for advice. I know that you work with young Virgin Islanders. Well, not young anymore. I guess they're my age, so that's not really that young.
Oh, I wouldn't.
It's relative.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
But you support us in business, your thoughts, your ideas, an advisor. Do you think that engagement with young people keeps you looking as good as you are right now?
Oh, thank you for that. I needed that. But I would say that developing the youngsters to be better citizens and leaders for tomorrow is a very critical aspect of one's giving back to where you came from.
True.
And I'm involved with this Colin Powell School at the City College of New York. One of the things that we do there is find a way to give immigrants, first-generation Americans, an opportunity that the City College have always been given to immigrants for years and years ago. I've been involved with youngsters at the William and Mary and still stay involved in those kinds of activities. Building for tomorrow starts with the youngsters.
Yeah.
And the America's Promise deals with youngsters. We're obligated to do that. We don't have a choice if we want tomorrow to be better.
That's true.
For the generations to come.
Very, very true.
And that's why education is so important. That's why I think what you're doing to help to build the island's educational system is critical.
Thank you. Well, you know, I wanted to bring you on here because you're an elder that is an unsung person. Many of our young people in the Virgin Islands don't know who you are. You lead a very respectful, you're not a showy person. You go about quietly in a dignified manner doing your duty to your country, to your family.
I learned that in the islands in St. Croix.
I'm sure you did. But it's important that we let people know who you are, for you to have an opportunity to give a voice to what you've learned so that young people can hear about it. So Virgin Islanders can have a sense of pride and recognize what's available to them, right? Your life is an example of what can be accomplished. Just tremendous, sir. Just absolutely tremendous. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to spend some time with me and to share your thoughts and what you've done thus far, because I know you think you're retired, but there's much more for you to do. And know that if I call, please answer. And whenever you need me, I'm here.
Well, I'm glad that you're where you're at, because you're doing great things for the territory.
Thank you, sir.
And great things for the country, by the way.
Thank you,
as
sir.
a whole.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to thank you all for being with us. This was a really important time for us to meet an important Virgin Islander, an important American, an American hero, General Sam Eberson. Thank you all. God bless. And peace to all for the new year.